Good afternoon. I tried to start this video a few days ago and somehow it got messed up. And I realized maybe the timing just wasn't correct for getting it out there. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is going to become more important as time goes on. And that is about the narrative that we hear and the enemy and confusion. Jesus warns us that in the last days, the first thing he says is, do not be deceived. And I know we're all familiar with that. And we just, yeah, that sounds good. But I have hit on something, and I'm hoping that I can get through this without it being a potpourri of thoughts from wherever. So if it gets to be too messy, I'll probably stop, but I'm praying that I can get this out. I've been reading through the book of First Samuel, and I think I told you, since I no longer have Alan to listen to, I've struggled a little bit, and I think it's because I had to learn that I'm not going to be learning the same way that I was when he was teaching. I'm going to have to change things up. And I decided that what I was going to do was just read carefully through the chapters and wait for the Lord to speak to me. And as I went through 1 Samuel 13, the Philistines were coming against Israel, and they were talking about bronze and iron. Now, I didn't pay attention to history, the Bronze era, the Iron era, which was, 1200 to 1000 BC or something like that. But the more I studied it, the more I realized how important it was, because it gives us some clues to what is going on now. As I'm recording this at the end of January 2026. And this has been one of the craziest months I can ever remember. The news is coming at us so quickly that, frankly, from one day to the next, it's like we put down one crisis and we pick up the next before our brains even have the opportunity to deal with what's going on. And that in itself could be a video, and perhaps it will be at some point. But as I was going through about the Philistines and the bronze and the iron, I started researching it a bit, and it looked to me as if what was taking place was the Philistines, they lived on the outskirts right along the border, almost where Gaza is today, in that strip right there. And they did a lot of trade, and they went back and forth to different countries, and they got a lot of technology that was not available to other people. And one of those pieces of technology was how to make iron and how to forge iron to be stronger than any weapon or any metal that they had had previously. The bronze, era was important, but they kind of went from bronze into iron. And when they did that, they held on to that technology and wouldn't share it with Israel. And what happened was they became a mighty people because they had this technology. And Israel, in the land of Israel that time, you could not find one blacksmith at all. Anytime they needed tools sharpened, if they needed to have weapons, anything that they needed along the iron and bronze era, they would have to go and make a deal with the Philistines in order to get what they needed. As I thought about that, I realized the place of power that put the Philistines in, and how it crippled Israel and made them almost a subservient people to this technology that they couldn't get their hands on. As I read forward, and of course, we all know the story of David and Goliath when he went out against Goliath, and Goliath was decked, and the scripture tells us 5 different times he had bronze swords and he had bronze helmets and he had bronze breastplates and he had bronze, whatever, 5 different times. And when Saul tried to give David bronze, he said, I can't deal with this. I don't even know what it is. Yes, it was faith, but it was also coming from a position where he didn't know, because Israel did not have the resources to become acquainted with how to use those weapons. So David was going out there with the only weapon he had, which was stones, how he had defeated bears and lions. The people of Israel were looking at Goliath, and they had that in the back of their minds, that they were a subservient people to these monster people who had all this technology that they didn't have. Remember the word yareh. When you give something credence, when you give it weight, when you give it value, and that's what the Israelites had done. They had, without even thinking about it, giving that value to the Philistines because they were dependent upon them. Because the Philistines were so strong with the iron and with the bronze, that it basically created a society where they were able to tell Israel, this is how much you can plow. This is how you can fight. This is how much land you can seize, etc. They had inadvertently, through knowing this technology and using it, they had put Israel in a position where Israel didn't even know that they were becoming subservient to this people. So when David came out against Goliath and took the stones and killed him, the Philistines ran. What happened was, this was at the very time when the era of history was going from bronze to iron, and actually David became the king who actually was able to get that technology of iron, and he became a mighty army. Why? Because he had gotten this technology by defeating the Philistines, and that was the beginning of the end. So we're not really taught that. We're taught a lot about faith and how he stood there and all that, and that's all wonderful. But there's a reason that these things take place. Fasting forward to our present day, there are now technologies that are available to some countries that are not available to other countries. This week, I heard about when we went down to Venezuela and took their leader, and we had a weapon with us that basically stunned their entire system that they had in place, so that we were able to sneak in and sneak out. And they were kind of like, I almost pictured it like they were frozen, because they couldn't even acknowledge that it had shut down everything. Our president came out this week and he said, we have weapons that nobody even knows about. We have the countries of the world that have those technologies, and we have them divided into Pakistan and Iran and, Israel and the United States and Russia and China, those who have the bomb. And then we have those who do not. And those who do not are the ones that are basically in their mind subservient to these technological countries that have this stuff. What has come out of it for me, as I have studied and prayed, is that this is what countries are after. There's a quote by Shakespeare that says, all the world is a stage and all the men and women are the players. And I want you to keep that in mind, because right now we are being bombarded with messages. And as I look at the news, I like to look at it by going back and listen to the historians and seeing, how has this happened before and what is taking place? And I'm ready to make a statement today. Whether you agree or not, it's okay. But I believe that everything that is going on right now, it has nothing to do with people. It actually has nothing to do with peace or wars. It has everything to do with technology and who is going to be the big dog in the world. And as we see people like our president running from one country to the next, we can kind of scratch our head and think, what the heck? What would he want Greenland for? Why are we in Venezuela? What is going on? If you step back from it and you think technology, and you look at China and you think technology, every single move, every chess move that is made by a country is made for one reason and one reason only, and that is to obtain something to make them stronger, whether it be oil reserves or technology or weaponry or computer. Those things are all being put into place because they are running a race to see who is going to be the Philistines, who is going to have the most toys and have everyone else subservient to them. How does this affect us? There's some things that we need to understand as we read and look at the news. And the first thing is, don't get caught up in all the drama that's going on. It's exhausting. As I listen to what is going on in Minnesota, as I listen to what is going on in Venezuela, as I listen to what is going on in Ukraine, Iran, ships are coming in, this is going on, that's going on. My brain feels like a pimple that's going to pop. It is just overwhelming to me. My brain is on overload. Sometimes I don't think we did ourselves any favors by having all this technology at a fingertip. When my husband was alive and he died in 2011, we didn't have phones that could take us anywhere in the world within minutes. We had events happen in world history like 9/11 that we didn't have telephones blasting away, taking pictures of everything that happened. If we had, it would have been a different story. And that's all I'll say about that. But now we have technology that everyone is carrying with them, and everything is being recorded from 17 different angles and then presented. I want you to understand that what is being presented to us is a narrative. A narrative is a story that they want us to believe. And I'm not taking sides here and saying that this one's right and this one's wrong. In my opinion, they're all wrong. They're all off the mark. They've all missed the mark because they're putting their own narrative in there. And then people are just jumping on the bandwagon. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Well, the way I saw it was, well, and I saw it this way, and I have this to back me up. And we are getting lost in that narrative instead of stepping back from everything that's going on and saying, what is going on? And what is going on is we are being duped. We are being deceived. We are being told to believe things that our eyes are telling us other than what is happening. And we are being told stories and we're like, yeah, that makes sense. We had a report come out in the news today where families of fishermen from Venezuela are suing our president and our country because they said their families were out there fishing and they were blown out of the water. My brain just kind of went, psh, who do I believe here? I don't know who's right, who's wrong. All I know is Venezuela is last week's news. And then we went on to Greenland. And then Trump went over there and came home with a story that everything was fine. And that was last week's news. And now we're on to something else. And we're being told that the Second Amendment applies, but it really doesn't apply if you have the gun in your pocket and you go to a place maybe you shouldn't be. So we are being told one deception after another. And we go back to the word that says, in the final days, do not be deceived. And whether we are intelligent and caught up on the news and praying and fasting and listening, or whether we are putting our head in the sand and just watching it all blow up, the bottom line is the same. There's a narrative that is being given to us, And if we follow that narrative, we are going to be in danger. Last week, we had a narrative being given to us by the weather department. I live in Upper Virginia, and they told us for about 6 days, maybe more, that we were going to have the storm of the century. Now, to give you some background, I lived in Fort Myers, Florida. I lived through Hurricane Ian, which was a Category 5 hurricane a few years ago. And I remember the hype that came before that hurricane. And you know what? That was not fun. We decided to stay in our home because there was nowhere for us to go. Everybody in the world was trying to get onto one freeway to get out of the state. And that storm was coming to us like gun barrels. And I don't mind telling you, I was terrified. We heard stories where we were going to have 13-foot storm surge. My daughter and I looked at each other and looked at the shelves that we had above the living room and wondered if we could possibly squeeze the kids up there, and who would hold the dogs, and how would we be with the water, and could we get to the roof? And it was terrible. The storm came, and I would love to tell you that it was not what they said, but it was. The narrative was true. We had winds at my house of 150 miles an hour. I listened as my whole house moved from side to side, swishing back and forth. It sounded like trains going through my backyard. I heard parts of my roof being blown off. I had things in the yard that were hitting the windows, even though we had shutters on there. And when we got up the next day after it was gone, we got outside and our fence was blown away. There were only sticks in the yard. The yard was covered with trees that were down, that had missed the inch by inches our house. So that was a narrative that we had to go through, and a storm that we had to go through. So I'm familiar with storms. We went for 3.5 weeks with no power. And that's a story for another video. But just to say, it was one of the most terrifying times of my life. Flash forward to now. We are having in Virginia the storm of the century. Everything in me said, I need to be vigilant, but I need to be cautious not to overreact. Because if you start feeding too much stuff into your brain, you can have a mental collapse. And so as the storm grew closer, we saw we're going to get 18 to 24 inches of snow. We're going to have winds of 60 miles an hour. I can deal with all that, honestly, because I grew up in Buffalo. But when they added the ice, and they said that the ice was going to be a couple inches thick on top of the snow, and it was going to bring down the trees, and it was going to cut the power, and we could be without power for a couple of weeks, that's when I lost it. The narrative became a weapon against me. In spite of the fact that I had gone out, my sister had helped me, and we got a shovel, and I got boots, and we got food in the house, and everything that I could to make myself as prepared as I could. I knew I live in the country, and if those trees come down, I could be sitting here with temperatures of 0 degrees with no heat for a week or more by myself. And I began to array the storm. I began to give it credence, give it weight, give it value, and I began to freak out. And the night before it came, I texted my sister and I said, I feel like I'm going to die. I am terrified. I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. If this power goes out, I could be sitting in this house by myself with my dog and a blanket on, trying to stay alive for the next 5 or 10 days. And I can't deal with it. And I tried to pray my way out, but frankly, I felt like I was being strangled. Much like the Israelites felt as they saw Goliath in the field that day, because the narrative they had chosen to believe was crippling them. My sister said, Cindy, I don't know what you want me to do. She was not very gentle. And she said, I've done everything I can. I made sure you had a shovel. I made sure you had boots. You know, you've got a coat, you've got blankets, you've got a flashlight. You know, what do you want me to do? Well, frankly, I didn't want her to solve it. I wanted her to commiserate with me, but she wasn't getting on that bandwagon. So I had to get off the phone and realize I'd not only, had a nervous breakdown, but I'd ticked off my sister. I just turned to the Lord and said, help me. You got me through Ian. You will get me through this. And he did. And as I sit now, 4 or 5 days from the storm, I can't get out of my house. My entire yard is ice. I can't get up the stairs to my car. I can't get to the store. I can't do anything, but I'm safe and I'm in my home. And so I've had a lot of time to digest what had taken place and how the narrative of what was given to us was something that I embraced and I ran with, and it channeled me into a groove that I really should not have gone in. Because the bottom line is, he knows the plans he has for me, saith the Lord. Plans to give you a future and a hope, not to harm you. And I have to trust in that, even when my brain is overloaded. So what I'm saying through all of this is, as we are bombarded daily with a narrative that says the Iran is going to blow up all the vessels in the Gulf, and Iran is going to send missiles, and China is going to do this, and this is to keep us busy. This is to keep our minds like jello, so that then they meaning the powers of darkness, can start feeding us with fear, to put us in a position where we are no longer capable of making rational decisions. So as you move forward, unfortunately, what we're seeing going on is only going to get worse. There's going to come a day where the tribulation is going to start, and this stuff is going to seem like child's play with what is going on. And you are going to have to do a few things to take care of yourself so that you don't become a mush pot where things can be put in and you can be deceived. Because it's not only being deceived about what Satan is doing, but you will be deceived about what the Lord is doing. And you will not trust in the Lord like you should, because your thoughts are being fed by that narrative. So as I look forward, I have to make some choices, and some of them are harder than others. Choice number one, I have to stop being so involved in the news. I don't have a lot going on here. I read my Bible, I do a little painting, I do some cooking, and when I'm not busy, I turn on usually YouTube to see what's going on, and I flip around, and usually I find something that just pollutes my brain, meaning the news. I have to be careful. If I start to watch something and I can feel that anxiety come up, I switch away. I can't tell you how many little episodes of Lucky Dog I've watched in the last week, and cooking shows and things like that that aren't going to muddy my brain. I've watched enough Hallmark movies to basically write my own story. But I have to, because it's a protection. Number two, you need to watch out for the enemy, because he wants to sow the seeds of fear. If you look at any news vehicle, thing that they're putting out right now, and you read even the caption, they are selling it. They call it clickbait. World is blowing up. This is going on. That is going on. Oh, we have this much time left. Even the so-called prophets and end-time preachers are sitting there talking about all the stuff that's going to happen with the wars. They don't have a clue either. They really don't. None of us do. But the more we feed in there, we are feeding ourselves fear. So you need to be careful to not do that. And then you have to know what are your hot buttons. For me, fear of storms is right up there at the top. I can deal with wars better than I can storms, because I've been through a storm that terrified me. So when I heard this was coming my way, it's just like I clicked into that mode again. And every Ryan Hall video that I watch saying, well, it's just heading your way, I just got worse and worse. And I was able to be deceived. Was it a huge deception where, oh, forsake my faith? No. Was it a deception? Yes, because I fed into the narrative that says you're not going to be okay. You're going to have immediate danger and dot, 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 and the Lord won't rescue you. And that night when I called my sister, I really felt like, yeah, I know he can rescue me, but will he? I went through Ian. Am I really? Because my sister said, you'll get through this, Cindy. Well, I didn't want to get through this like that. I didn't want to be cold on myself for holding my dog for 5 days. But instead of stopping to pray and removing myself from the narrative that is being fed, there's a pot that's being stirred by the enemy. And he's throwing everything he can into it, whether it be killings on the street, killings in Iran, numbers of 35 and 40,000 people, people who think they're doing a right job by posting videos online of bodies laying in the street. You don't need this. I lived for years without knowing this stuff. I lived through snowstorms in Buffalo that would cripple the city for weeks. And we didn't know anything other than we're okay today. So the word of caution is be careful what you are feeding yourself. Do not give in to fear and know what your fears are. There's another snowstorm heading my way this weekend. And you know what? I'm deliberately not looking. Because the bottom line is, I can't do a dang thing about it. I'm in my house. I've made chicken soup. I'm learning new recipes. And you know what? I'm in the Lord's hands. So as times get worse, and they will, my friend, they are going to get worse. If the month of January is any indication of where we are going this year, I pray, Maranatha, come quickly, because it's getting ugly. And between now and that time, protect yourself, protect your mind. I just sat here. I didn't do the study the same way I always had, but I opened the Bible and I just started reading slowly, quietly, thoughtfully. Because why? Because the TV was off and my mind was not plugged in to the cesspool. It was plugged in to Yahweh. So I hope that that helps you. I hope that that is an encouragement to you. It is to me, and I know it's something I'm going to have to fight. There's a certain adrenaline that comes into our systems when we feel danger or when we see things. It's like the train wreck where we can't look away. And that's kind of what the news is doing to us. But I'm encouraging you, look away. Look to the one that is the author and the finisher of our faith. I pray that this video goes out this time and that has made sense and that it's not the hodgepodge that it was a few days ago. I pray for you as you watch this that you will allow the Lord to convict you in the areas that you need him to say, stop. Put on your worship music. Read the word. Unplug your mind because the enemy is working overtime. Have a good day, my friends.